Those alive during 9/11, what was the worst moment on that day?
Coming home and watching my mom try to explain to my 7-year-old little brothers that what had happened had nothing to do with the fact that it was still their birthday. Dad was grounded halfway across the country on a business trip. We spent half the day trying to get a hold of our aunt who was actively working in the Pentagon, and they were too young to fully grasp why everyone around them was panicking. Mom unplugged all of the TVs, and we had dinner and cake as if nothing had happened. Her grace and composure kept an already horribly day from consuming our reason to celebrate. Even today, our family holds the mentality that it was their day first. We can remember with the rest of the country, but it's still first and foremost their birthday to be celebrated.
I was in college, and I remember this dull murmur in the computer lab as I was trying to work. I remember someone saying, "Dude, the Pentagon was hit," and I got this sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. You bring up an interesting point. The news was regularly breaking with significant new information, or it was just happening on live TV as the cameras captured it. The first plane hit, it was significant coverage. The second plane hit on live TV for many people, not breaking news, just watching when it happened, and the reporters were trying to describe it without panicking, and everyone realized it was intentional. Then the news about the Pentagon being hit. Then shots of people jumping from the windows to escape the fire. I was watching a reporter live when he stopped talking and started to run away. Then the tower fell with no commentary from anyone. Just a live shot of the collapse. You saw people walking around covered in dust, some with blood showing underneath. Then we waited for the second tower to collapse. Then the story broke about the plane crashing in the field in Pennsylvania, with passengers calling their loved ones. I might have the order that the news broke wrong. It was this slow roll of increasingly shocking news. Not one event followed by wall-to-wall coverage and tiny new details. I was afraid to stop watching the news because every time I'd think about turning it off, something major would happen.
Seeing all of the people jump from the flaming towers. It was sanitized from most replays, but when the event was being shown live, you could see one person after another jump. Some would jump 5, 6 people at a time. You could see holes in the roof of a pavilion where the bodies tore through. And you could see the results on the ground, although identifying them as human was impossible. The thought of what those people must have been facing inside the towers that made jumping to their deaths the better option was horrifying.
School didn't allow us to watch and teachers were told to not tell us much. By noon we thought every city had been attacked. Kids were being pulled every few minutes with a crying parent walking them out. I think we ended up leaving early, but I can't remember fully, but I do remember traffic being held up so our town and the 3 nearby could convoy nearly all fire trucks to the city to go help. Going home you could see everything burning on the skyline. Wasn't until I got home to my mom on the phone crying that I turned on the TV to see footage of the second plane hitting. Pick any one of those. It was a bad day.
My father was an airline pilot for United Airlines, and he flew transcontinental from NYC/Boston on a regular basis. I was away at college and had no idea where he was until the afternoon. He ended up being in Denver for almost a week, but he knew quite a few of the crew members that died that day. He keeps a plaque with all of their names in his office. Secondly, the jumpers and people hanging out of the windows to breathe. I feel like they fundamentally changed me as a person. The thought of people just going to work and then having to decide to die is a mindfuck. I still get very anxious in tall buildings and confined spaces.
The fear of not knowing what was going on. Back then we didn't have things like Twitter or Reddit to breathlessly share information the second it happens, but even then in the first day that the attacks happened the amount of misinformation spreading in the community was huge. I remember my school bus driver that afternoon was trying to convince us all that there were terrorist planes still in the air and that we could be in danger. Later on, the worst moments were when audio began to spread on the internet of some people's last moments that day. There is a horrific video still easily found on YouTube of the audio of a man that was stuck in one of the towers, speaking with a news station over the phone, when the tower he was in started to fall. You can hear people screaming in the background. The guy screams, "Oh God," and within a second, silence as the line cuts off. The realization that these people in that moment were all violently crushed into nothingness was sickening.
I am Australian. When this happened I was in my early 30s. It happened late at night our time, but we had actually gone to bed so didn't know until alarm went off at 5 a.m. We were dumbfounded. It was just so incredibly awful that it was hard to comprehend. We went to work, but not a lot of work got done that day. Everyone was just crowded around a TV in shock. And I will never forget seeing all those people jumping or falling. Just made me feel so sick to the pit of my stomach. Having been up to the top in 1995, when I traveled in the USA, I can remember looking down, as seeing the cars like specks, and people were falling from that height. Sickening. The world changed forever that day. Pre-9/11 vs post-9/11.
I lived right across the river in Jersey where my dad managed a hardware store in Newark. I remember being a kid and all of the firefighters from other towns stopping by for equipment and gear. We ran out quickly, but my dad told them to take whatever they need and go. No payment, no time to waste, just grab it and go. I also remember that when the second plane hit, everyone was comparing 9/11 to Pearl Harbor. As a final note, the positive side was every American, regardless of age, race, economic status, was united. The feeling was incredible, and I don't think we will ever experience it again in my lifetime. The feeling of being truly united and ready to kick some ass with the entire world standing with us is indescribable. Everyone wanted to pitch in and somehow do their part. As an American, in the span of a day, the nation was transformed. Unfortunately, this was mismanaged, and as we all know, it seems like things have pretty much been going downhill since 9/11. The world on September 10th was so widely different and carefree versus the world on September 12th.
Evacuating Washington, D.C. I was working on 15th Street across from the White House and had just gotten to work around 8 a.m. After the second plane hit, we figured something big was going down and some of us headed out to go home, and it was a tense scene. Nobody was sure that we weren't about to get nuked, that planes would start falling everywhere, etc. Some people wouldn't ride the metro, so they walked all the way back to Virginia. I was back in Roslyn by the time the Pentagon got hit. My wife, who worked for a major defense contractor, was stuck at work most of the day, so when Flight 93 crashed about 20 miles from her hometown, she was also very worried. They finally let people leave around 3. The news was full of unsubstantiated rumors, wild speculation, and plenty of misinformation. We were all jumping between channels, trying to get the whole picture. I had family from rural areas telling me to come there and hunker down. A lot of people left the DC area because there was rumors of further gas or bio attacks, etc. It was very tense being a Muslim or Sikh around DC, and many innocent people were harassed and abused. I had to take some work and groceries to a single co-worker who was afraid to go to the store because of the abuse. I think the most memorable part for me was that the attackers did a great job pointing out how we panic and overreact in a situation like this. They controlled the narrative and we reacted just like they wanted. We self-imposed a police state in response, and suddenly a small group brought most of the world to its knees, reducing freedoms, just as they intended.
I was in 8th grade and my mom picked me up from school early. One of our best close neighbors was a pilot, and one of the planes was literally his route, although his partner crew was working the route that day. It was early in the day, and when we went to check on him, he was in his underwear with an almost empty bottle of Jack Daniels in front of him. He was not a drinker, and he was crying. His wife and kids were in the other room, not knowing what to do or how to help him as he watched his colleagues and friends die. That is my clearest memory of that day.
Split screen. There was a moment when the news anchors cut to a shot of the Pentagon on fire and they went to split screen with the towers on one side and the P on the other. I fucking lost it. All the anchors and field reporters looked scared and shocked and completely at a loss and trying to keep up. The family members kept jumping on the mix asking for any information, please, about loved ones that were in the vicinity of Wall Street. 9/11 wasn't a day. It was a week, a month, a new normal. And we relived it when Flight 587 went down in Queens 2 months later. Terror slammed into us again. To those who didn't experience this day, I envy you.
I'm 27, lifelong New Yorker. I was 4 at the time. I don't have many memories from when I was that young, but that day I remember pretty vividly. My mom pulled me and my twin out of school. It was pre-K, I think. I remember being pretty confused as to why my teacher was so shell-shocked, and I got really scared. My mom was bawling the whole time, and it terrified me, made me start crying. She drove us to a family friend's place in Westchester, and my clearest memory of that day was seeing the news on the TV as my mom cried. When you're 4, you don't really have an understanding of what mortality is, and being scared normally means you think there's a monster in the closet. That was the first time I ever really felt like existential levels of dread. Everything felt so wrong, and I could see the smoke in the skyline, and on the TV, saw footage of the buildings on fire, people jumping, rubble. It was beyond confusing and scary, and saddening. Apparently, my uncle worked down there at the time, but had called out sick or was hungover or something. My dad lost a very close friend who worked in one of the towers. As an aside, when I graduated college, my first job was at an engineering firm right by Zuccotti Park, a block away from WTC in the financial district downtown. My first week, I took a stroll down to the memorial pools and found my dad's friend's name. Paul Joseph Simon. Honestly ruined my day seeing his name, LOL. I didn't expect to be taken right back to that feeling of hopelessness from that day.
I was 18 and a freshman in college. I was with a colleague in the library studying for an upcoming exam when some old guy popped his head in and told us, "America is under attack." We bolted for the campus cafeteria, at that time, had the largest TV. It was like witnessing a slow-moving train wreck. The second the camera panned to another plane flying into the second tower, you knew it wasn't an accident and that it was deliberate. Like a slow-moving train wreck, the towers collapsing causing debris and dust to go everywhere. Folks back then were still using AOL Instant Messenger. AM, to chat. College kids from the Northeast freaking out not able to get through to loved ones. Learning about people jumping to their deaths, head first. Our college was in a military town and hearing fighter jets screaming in the distance, I was uncertain if more commercial planes would suddenly be used for other targets.
I went on the South Tower in May 2001. I was 6. I got to witness one of the most spectacular views in my life, a beautiful view of the Hudson River via one of those coin-operated binoculars. Fast forward 4 months, I'm seeing that very tower collapse in front of my eyes on live TV, not even pre-recorded. The South Tower was hit second, but it was the first to fall. That was my worst moment during September 11th. 2001, watching the very tower that gave me that beautiful memory collapse live, and shortly before that, I saw a bunch of people jump off the buildings to their deaths. A horrifying thing to witness as a 6-year-old. And the years following that, oh boy, the retaliation that the US did by invading Afghanistan later that year and especially Iraq in 2003, it was shocking and saddening. I'm a Muslim too. Anti-Muslim rhetoric was at an all-time high.
Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you might enjoy the rest of my content. Check it out.